There was a moment. I remember it so clearly. I was at a job interview. The interviewer asked me a simple question, something like, "Tell me about yourself." And I knew the answer. In my head, in my own language, I knew exactly what I wanted to say. But when I opened my mouth, nothing came out. Just silence, and this embarrassing smile. I kept thinking in my language, searching for the English words, and by the time I found them, the moment was gone. I didn't get the job.
That feeling is so real, and I think so many people listening right now know exactly what you're talking about. That moment when you have the thought, but the English just doesn't come. And the worst part? You're smart. You know so much, but somehow, in English, you feel like a completely different person, a slower, quieter version of yourself.
Exactly, and that experience stayed with me for a long time. Because I realized the problem wasn't my vocabulary. I had studied English for years. I knew thousands of words. The problem was something else, something deeper. I was still thinking in my first language, and then translating everything into English. And that's what we want to talk about today.
Welcome to the Easy Conversation Podcast. I'm Mia.
And I'm James. And today we're going to talk about one of the most common, most frustrating experiences for English learners, the translation trap. What it is, why it happens, and, most importantly, what you can actually do about it.
So let's start with the actual problem. When most people learn English, they build a kind of mental bridge. They think of a word or an idea in their native language, and then they cross the bridge to find the English version. So if I want to say, "I'm hungry," my brain first creates that thought in my first language, and then it finds the translation. It's like having a dictionary running inside your head all the time.
And honestly, at the beginning, that's fine. When you're learning, translation is a useful tool. It helps you understand new words. It helps you make connections. There's nothing wrong with it in the early stages. But at some point, it starts to hold you back. Because language is fast, conversation is fast. And if your brain needs to go through that translation process every single time, you're always going to be a few seconds behind.
Right. And those few seconds matter so much in a real conversation. You miss the moment. The person speaking to you has already moved on. And then you feel panicked, and the panic makes it even harder to think. And suddenly, a simple conversation starts to feel like climbing a wall.
That's such a good way to put it. And here's the thing that took me a long time to understand. This isn't about intelligence. This isn't about how much you've studied. It's about how your brain has learned to process the language. Translation was the first tool you were given, and your brain got very good at using it. It just needs a new tool now.
And that new tool is thinking directly in English. No bridge, no translation, just the thought arrives in English. Which sounds impossible if you've never experienced it, but it's not. It's actually a skill you can build, deliberately, slowly, and it changes everything.
It really does, and we're going to talk about how. But first, let's talk about some of the specific ways this translation habit shows up, because I think it'll be helpful to recognize it in yourself before you try to change it.
So, one of the most common things I hear from learners is, "I understand English when I read it or listen to it, but when I try to speak, I freeze." Does that sound familiar to anyone?
Oh, completely. And the reason that happens is actually very interesting. When you're reading or listening, you have time. You can process at your own pace. But when you're speaking, especially in a conversation, everything is real time. You have to think and produce language at the same moment. And if your thinking is still happening in another language, those two steps, thinking and translating, can't happen fast enough together.
Another thing people describe is this feeling of their English sounds flat. Like they know they're saying the right words. Grammatically, everything is correct, but somehow it doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel like them. And I think part of that is because when we translate, we sometimes lose the personality of our speech, the rhythm, the color, the way we would actually express that idea if we were just being ourselves.
That's such a deep point. Because language isn't just words, it's personality. When you're thinking in your native language, your thoughts come with emotion and tone and humor and all these little details that make you, you. But when you translate, some of that gets lost on the bridge. You arrive at the other side with the content, but maybe not all the feeling.
And there's another one I want to mention. This one is particularly painful. The almost said it feeling, you know? You're in a conversation, you have the perfect response ready in your head, but by the time you've translated it and you're ready to say it, the conversation has moved on. And you just sit there quietly with your perfect sentence that no one will ever hear.
I have lived that moment so many times. It's almost funny, except when it's happening, it doesn't feel funny at all. It feels lonely. Like there's a whole part of you that's invisible in English.
Yes, and I think that's actually the emotional core of what we're talking about today. It's not just a communication problem, it's a self-expression problem. You have a full, complex, interesting mind, and you want to share that with the world in English, but something is blocking it, and that block is the translation habit. So, how do we remove it?
So I want to start with something that changed things for me completely. And it's so small that people often dismiss it. I started narrating my day, silently in my head, in English. Just describing what I was doing as I was doing it. Like a quiet little commentary. I'm making coffee. The water is hot. I need to find my keys. Nothing complicated, just my thoughts in English about the most ordinary things.
And what happened?
At first, it felt very strange, a little childish even, because the thoughts were so simple. But that's exactly the point. I wasn't thinking about grammar. I wasn't translating. I was just living in English. And slowly, over weeks, not overnight, I noticed that English started to feel more like a home, less like a building I was visiting. The thoughts started to arrive in English on their own. Not perfectly, not always, but they started arriving.
I love that. And it connects to something I want to talk about, which is the idea of thinking in images, not words. Because here's something interesting. When a native English speaker thinks of the word apple, they don't think of a translation of the word. They just see an apple, or feel the texture, or remember the taste. The word and the thing are directly connected in their mind. There's no middle step.
Right. And when you're a learner who is still translating, the word apple first appears in your language, and then you find the English word for it. So you have two steps. But if you practice connecting English words directly to images, to sensations, to memories, you can start to collapse that into one step. You see the apple, and English comes.
And you don't have to do this in a formal study way. It can be incredibly casual. When you're walking down the street, you look at a dog and you think, dog, in English. Not in your language, then English. Just dog. Or you look at the sky and you think, it looks like rain. Small moments, tiny habits, but they add up in a way that's hard to describe until you've felt it yourself.
And I want to talk about something that I think people overlook a lot, which is surrounding yourself with English in a specific way. Not just watching English movies with subtitles in your own language, which honestly can keep you in translation mode. But watching content where you are genuinely curious about what's happening. Content that makes you forget you're studying.
Yes, The emotion matters so much. When you're genuinely invested in what you're watching, a documentary, a comedy show, a conversation between two people you find interesting, your brain engages differently. It's not looking for translations, it's looking for meaning. And meaning is what you want your brain to get from English, not word-for-word equivalents.
There's also something really powerful about talking to yourself. I know that sounds a little odd, but so many people who've become fluent in a second language describe this. Having conversations with themselves in English, not rehearsed scripts. Just, if something happened in your day, you tell it to yourself in English. If you're making a decision, you think it through in English. You become your own conversation partner.
And the great thing about talking to yourself is that there's no pressure. You can stop, you can start over, you can use a simple word when you don't know the complex one. You're not being judged, you're just practicing existing in English. And the more you do it, the more natural it feels to form thoughts in English.
There's one more thing I want to bring up, and I think this is maybe the most important shift in mindset. A lot of learners think they need to master English before they can stop translating. But actually, it's the other way around. You need to stop translating, at least sometimes in small moments, to start mastering English. The fluency doesn't come first. The courage to think imperfectly in English comes first.
That's really it, isn't it? You have to give yourself permission to think in broken, imperfect, sometimes incorrect English, because that imperfect thinking is the training. Your brain gets better through the struggle, not after it.
And one thing that really helped me with this was changing how I thought about mistakes. For a long time, a mistake felt like evidence that I wasn't good enough. But if you think of mistakes as data, like, interesting, my brain chose the wrong word there. Now I know something. They stop being so painful. They become part of the process rather than proof of failure.
And I think it also helps to remember that even native English speakers don't always have the perfect word. They pause. They rephrase. They sometimes say, "What's the word I'm looking for?" The internal experience of language is messier for everyone than it looks from the outside. You're not behind. You're just in a different part of the process.
Okay, we want to give you something concrete to do after this episode. Something small, something you can actually do today. Are you ready?
We call it the English Window Challenge.
For the next 5 days, choose one small window of time, maybe 15 minutes, where you commit to thinking only in English. It could be your morning coffee, your commute, the first 15 minutes after you wake up. Whenever works for you.
During that window, you narrate your thoughts, your actions, your observations, silently in your head in English. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to use complex words. If you don't know a word, use a simple one. If you can't express the full idea, express part of it.
The goal is not fluency in 15 minutes. The goal is to notice how it feels to think in English. Where does it feel easy? Where does it feel stuck? That awareness is the beginning of change. Your challenge this week. For 5 days, open a 15-minute English window. Morning coffee, your commute, a walk. Narrate your thoughts in English, silently in your head. Don't translate. Use simple words. Just think. Notice where it flows and where it gets stuck. That noticing is the work.
And if you want to take it a step further, write 1 or 2 sentences in English in a notebook or your phone notes at the end of each day. Something that happened, something you thought about, just a sentence or 2. Not because anyone will read it, but because moving from thinking in English to writing in English is another layer of the same practice.
We'd love to know how it goes. If you try this, leave a comment and tell us, what did you notice? What was easy? What was hard? We read all of your comments, and we genuinely love hearing from you.
All right, let's bring it together before we move to the vocabulary section. Today we talked about something that doesn't get enough attention in English learning, the translation habit, and how to slowly replace it with something better.
So let's do a quick walkthrough of what we covered. We talked about why translation slows you down. Not because it's bad, but because it adds a step between thinking and speaking that becomes a barrier in real-time conversation. We talked about how translation shows up, the freezing, the flat feeling, the almost said it moment, and how all of these point back to the same root habit. We talked about narrating your day in English, quietly, in your head, as one of the most effective ways to build English as a default mode of thinking. We talked about connecting English words directly to images and feelings, not to their translation, so that the language feels more like a real experience and less like a code to decode. We talked about engaging with content emotionally, watching, reading, listening to things that genuinely interest you, so your brain is chasing meaning, not translation. And finally, we talked about the mindset shift, giving yourself permission to think imperfectly. Because imperfect English thinking is not failure. It is the work itself.
And the listener challenge this week is the English window, 15 minutes a day for 5 days. Think in English, observe what happens. That's it.
Now let's go through some vocabulary from today's episode. These are words that came up naturally in our conversation, and they're all useful for everyday English, especially if you want to talk about learning, thinking, and personal growth.
For each word, we'll give you the meaning, an example sentence, and one speaking question you can practice with, either alone or with a friend. 1. Fluent. Able to speak or write a language very easily and naturally without stopping to think. She became fluent in Spanish after living in Mexico for 2 years. What would your life look like if you were fluent in English? 2. Deliberate. Done on purpose, with full intention, not by accident. Improving your English requires deliberate practice every day, not just passive exposure. Can you think of something you have improved through deliberate practice? 3. Narrate. To describe what is happening, often as a story or commentary. He would narrate his morning routine in English to practice thinking in the language. Try to narrate what you did this morning using 3 English sentences. 4. Instinctive. Something that happens naturally, without thinking about it, like a reflex. After years of practice, her response in English became instinctive, no more long pauses. What is one thing you do in your daily life that feels completely instinctive? 5. Exposure. Contact with or experience of something, especially a language or new idea. Daily exposure to English conversations helped her understand the rhythm of the language. How much daily exposure to English do you currently have? Is it enough? 6. Process. A series of actions or steps taken to achieve a result. Also, to mentally work through something. Learning a language is a long process, but every small step counts. What part of your English learning process is the most challenging for you right now? 7. Barrier. Something that prevents progress or makes it difficult to move forward. For many learners, fear of making mistakes is the biggest barrier to speaking English confidently. What do you think is the biggest barrier in your English right now? 8. E-phrase. To say the same thing again using different words, often simpler or clearer ones. If you don't know a word, try to rephrase your idea using words you already know. Practice rephrasing this sentence in simpler English. I was overwhelmed by the complexity of the situation. 9. Absorb. To take in and understand information naturally, often without trying hard. Children absorb language quickly because they are not afraid to make mistakes. What kind of English content do you find easiest to absorb? Why? 10. Engage. To become interested and involved in something. To give your full attention. When you genuinely engage with content in English, your brain learns faster. What English content do you find it easiest to engage with? A show? A podcast? A book? 11. Awareness. The ability to notice and understand something about yourself or your situation. Developing awareness of when you're translating is the first step to breaking the habit. Do you have awareness of the moments when you feel most stuck in English? When are they? 12. Momentum. The feeling of forward movement and energy that builds when you make progress. Once she started speaking more, she built momentum and found it easier to keep going. Have you ever felt momentum in your English learning? What created it? 13. Retrieve. To find and bring something back, often used about memories or information stored in the brain. The goal is to retrieve English words directly, without going through your native language first. Do you think you retrieve English words quickly, or does it take a moment? Has this changed over time? 14. Hesitation. A pause or moment of uncertainty before doing or saying something. There was a noticeable hesitation before she answered, which made her feel embarrassed. Do you notice hesitation when you speak in English? Does it bother you? Why or why not? 15. Default. The option or behavior that happens automatically if you don't choose something different. The goal is to make English your default language for thinking, not just for speaking. What is your default language when you're stressed or emotional? Why do you think that is?
So, before we go, I want to say something that I really mean. The translation habit isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign that you learned. You tried. You built a system that worked for the level you were at. And now, you're ready for the next level. That's not something to be embarrassed about. That's actually something to be proud of.
And thinking in English, truly thinking in it, is not some magical destination that only a few people reach. It's a practice. It's something you do a little bit, and then a little bit more, and one day you realize that it's happening without effort. Not perfectly, not always, but it's happening. And that feeling, when you have a thought and it just arrives in English, it's quiet, but it matters a lot.
I remember the first time I noticed I had been thinking in English for 20 minutes without realizing it. I hadn't been trying. I was just thinking in English, like it was normal, like it was mine. And that was the moment I understood. The language can actually belong to you, not just as a subject you studied, as a part of how you think and who you are.
That's what we want for you. Not just better grammar, not just more vocabulary, but that feeling of being fully yourself in English, of having the full, rich, complicated, funny, emotional you come through in a second language. It's worth working for.
Thank you so much for spending this time with us today. It really does mean a lot to know that people all over the world are sitting with us, thinking about this together.
If you enjoyed this episode, and if it gave you something to think about or something to try, the best thing you can do is subscribe. We put out new episodes every week, and every one is designed for real English learners in real life. Not textbook English, just honest, useful conversation.
And leave us a comment. Tell us your translation story, the moment where you felt stuck, or the moment where something clicked. We love reading them, and we respond when we can. You're not alone in this.
Until next time, keep thinking, keep practicing, and be patient with yourself.
Take care. We'll talk soon. Bye.
Bye!